evolving, digitalized age. So there are 5 amazing speakers today who've come to share powerful insights. And first and foremost, I want to introduce to you Joel Dunn. He will be sharing findings from a groundbreaking study on school and university transition. We have second Uloma Odugoro, who will provide insights on online safety and social media, because everyone is using devices. Even the little babies are using devices. Our third guest speaker is Mr. Stephen Akinsenya, our latest OBE, but we'll go into that later on when he goes to speak. He's going to be talking about youth violence, knife crime. Stephen will be discussing advocacy about youth violence. Our fourth event voice will be Kemi Emmanuel. She's a global award winner, and she's going to be talking to us about mental health and SEND, which stands for Special Educational Needs and Disability. And last but not least, you will hear from our phenomenal founder, Chioma Fanawopo, our newest author in town. So in addition to all of this, we also have a raffle. So everybody, let's use this opportunity to get raffle tickets, because we've got some incredible prizes on offer. So just let me whet your appetite a little bit with the great gifts that we have that you'll be winning. So the first prize is a 30-minute financial assessment with a finance and wealth specialist, David Ogobogo. We also have a free copy of the Parenting as Leadership book, which is going to be launched today, and you will be winning a free copy. Thirdly, we have a 11 plus mock test vouchers. So this is worth actually £150, and this is for parents, caregivers of children in years 4, 5, and 6. And we also have a copy of The Essential Guide to Social Skills. This is a book by Kemi Emmanuel. We also have 30 minutes coaching sessions with our life and career coach. This is Coach Faith Ruto. So this is an incredible prize. Also, it's worth £150, and we have 2 of those. We also have the last set of gifts that we've got is 2 30-minute sessions with Chioma Fanawopo. Coach Chi is going to be offering parent coaching to those winners. So please, everybody, engage with us, buy your raffle tickets. You never know, you could win one of these great prizes. Of course, because this is a book launch that's going to be covered in the second part of the event, there is an opportunity to buy a copy of the book. So it's a pre-order option, and there are QR codes that you can scan to get your copy. I'll be flashing those up at some point in the presentation. And then finally, we've got stands. We've got 2 stands at the back here. On our right-hand side, we've got the Eminent Financial. So she's covering insurance services predominantly. So she'll be keen to speak to any parents, just everybody who's here really that wants to find out a little bit more about wealth creation, insurance, protection. So speak to her. We've also got Kemi Emmanuel. She's got a stand here, and she is also got a range of books there. In her specialist area is mental health and SEND. So please patronize our stands. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick presentation before I bring on Joel. And really I wanted to discuss about a subject that is one of those things that when I go into it you'll understand, but let's just gauge how many people in the room are parents, caregivers, educators, and also online. Say aye if you're a parent, caregiver. Okay, so most of us here are parents, caregivers. Also, how many of you have observed that children develop from their little fragile selves? You know, you're carrying this beautiful baby, and all of a sudden you blink, and they're toddlers, and they're teenagers, and they're going off to university. So how many of us can sort of, say, no, have experienced that? And just seeing the transformation that takes place. So how many of you have, observed this transition? Okay, so that's what it is. I'm going to take my book. So this is it. So we spend the first year of our children's lives. We want them to walk, we want them to talk, we want them to do all these amazing things. And then when they do, we want them to stop talking and stop walking. We don't want them going out and staying out till late. We don't want them going to the sweet shop or the supermarket to buy sweets or whatever it is after school. And that's how it is. So we spend the next 18 years telling them to sit down and be quiet. Who can relate to this? I'm hearing some sniggers, so I know there are some. Okay, so the honest truth is we are all in a constant state of transition. All of these processes that and these steps and these milestones that I've just highlighted, that's what it is. That's what transition is all about. And that's the subject of our talk today, our summit. So what is transition? Transition is a process or period of change from one state, condition, or place to another. So for example, with me being a scientist in my own right, when matter changes, ambiguous loss of growing up. That's the title of my talk. So we're talking about children, loving children while honoring the child who was. And that's what it is. I think it's one of those subject matters that as parents, it's difficult. We don't talk about it. We're so concentrated on, looking at the child, helping the child with their development, but we don't actually really grieve that pain of them transitioning from a child, a baby who's solely dependent on you, into this toddler who's a little bit more confident now, or into this teenager who is even more confident and doesn't actually need you. And I know that a lot of parents do struggle with this, and it's just one of those conversations that isn't really had. I know I've had that experience. So, story time. My son, when he was a year and a half, back in the day, of course, there was a little bit more leniency when it comes to discipline. So, if he was misbehaving, I would give him a tap on the back of the wrist, and that would quickly get him to order. So one day he says to me, Mom, I don't like you smacking me. So I looked at this 1.5-year-old and I'm thinking, why would he even say something like this to me? But okay, that's fine. So I said, okay, do you know what you need to do for me to stop smacking you? You have to behave yourself. And to my surprise, so then of course I went in and I elaborated and I said, if mommy tells you to do something, you do it, you listen. So to my surprise, I didn't have to smack this child for the next, well, ever after that. So for me, this is that realization. Actually, he understood what punishment was. He understood that actually if he misbehaves, this is what will happen. There are repercussions. And so, of course, he's now moved on to another stage of his life. He's no longer dependent. He's now conscious on a different level. And it's been like that throughout, him growing up. So really, when that happened, it was painful for me because I was thinking, well, how dare you? You're just a little child, How are you dictating or asking me? I want to discipline you how I want to discipline you. But there was now no need for it. And instead of me sort of accepting and moving on, I didn't. I was still surprised. So that's again that stage of grieving and that transitioning and kind of accepting that he has moved on to another stage of life. And it's been like that throughout all the processes. As I said, from toddler to teenager. Again, all of these years were presenting their various challenges. But it got to a point when there was another incident, and I think that's when I really realized I had to just let go and stand in a different position as a parent. So there was an incident at university, and he didn't tell me till later. And when I found out, I was livid. I thought, why haven't you come and told me so that I can go and speak to the head teachers? And he was like, no, I've handled it all. I've emailed them, I've been communicating with the heads. And for me, again, I was pained because I was thinking, well, how dare you? So I remember saying something to him. The conversation went something along the lines of, I'm your mother and I know best. And I know that I can impact, the situation. He was like, no, Mum, I've dealt with it. And it was so difficult because I then felt like I was helpless. I then felt that he was this independent person who just doesn't need me at all. But instead of me accepting that, yes, he's now moved on, and I should now be more of an advisor and a consultant to him as a parent, I didn't. So there was a little bit of tension for me for a couple of months. And, we went through the whole process, and in the end, we were able to clear things with the university, and he was able to move on. But again, this is the transition and this is the grieving process that I'm talking about. So I think, it's about finding ways to deal with these milestones and these transitions as they go through. Yeah, so one tip I can definitely give is that instead of dwelling on that situation and instead of sort of saying to yourself, okay, I'm feeling the pain that my child is no longer needing me, it's a case of accepting that they're at a different place. Is accepting it. And there's nothing wrong with accepting it because the earlier we accept it as parents, the earlier we can have our freedom as well. And when I say freedom, I don't mean entire freedom. I mean freedom in that we are growing these children, we're raising them to become individuals who are going to be out there in life by themselves. You're not always going to be around, and it's accepting that. They will be making decisions. And the most important thing is to instill in them that skill that they can walk away and make the right decisions when you're not around. So that's all I've got for you. Thank you very much for listening. So finally, without further ado, I'm going to be bringing up our... I just realized I did miss something. Apologies, before I bring Joe on. Obviously, we're in a room and anything can happen. First of all, there isn't any fire alarms, testing or anything that's anticipated for today. So if a fire alarm does go off, it's a real one. And we all need to go downstairs. We'll use the stairs. Please don't use the lift. We'll go downstairs and out of the building. Okay, there's access on both sides. So we can take the stairs and go out into the front of the building. That's the muster point. And then for anybody needing toilets, there's toilets downstairs. So first floor, take the first flight of stairs downstairs. and you'll see toilets there. It's a general unisex toilet. I think there's about 4 there. So those are the important things that I also missed to make point at the beginning. So let's move on to Joel. So let me introduce Joel before he comes up. Just bear with me, please. Okay, so this is Mr. Joel Dunn. He is, you can see he's navigated the criminal justice system. So this individual has been involved in the legal side of things. He's served some time, and Joel is driven by a deep sense of responsibility to create change. His experiences on the front line of youth violence have reinforced his belief that intervention must happen before upstream, before young people become caught in a cycle of disadvantage. As the founder and CEO of a grassroots charity, Joel brings a unique blend of lived experience, practical insights, and academic knowledge. He's currently pursuing a PhD in educational leadership and improvement at the University of Cambridge. He's also got some resounding research that he's going to be presenting to us today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you again Mr. Joel Dunn.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you to Choma for having me. I'm not going to be around later on for the book launch, so please join me in saying congratulations to her for her book launch today. That's really an amazing accomplishment, and I know how much work goes into that. The reason why I won't be able to be here later on is my daughter turns 6 tomorrow, so I'm under strict instructions that after I've done my section, I must return home for her party. So excuse me for making sure I stick to the time of my presentation. So yeah, can you go to my first slide, please? So there's some stuff there in the introduction. Some of it, let me slightly correct it. So I'm currently a doctoral researcher at the University of Cambridge, but the hat that I'm here wearing today is as the founder of a grassroots organization called Paradigm Project. And as was said in the introduction as well, so in 2016, I left prison. I served time for a violent offense, and that situation completely changed my life. Before that, I was a close protection officer, which is a fancy way of saying a bodyguard. So I was a bodyguard for a high net worth family. I got involved into an incident which meant that I ended up in prison, but it was during that time that I really found myself. I was able to do work on myself that I don't think any other circumstance would have allowed me to do. And one of the things that was really profound to me within that experience is I did a qualification for mentoring. And I started mentoring in the maths and English department, and I was working with the other men within the prison. And I realized that I had privileges that I had never acknowledged before. And in no way, I grew up 5 minutes from where we are right now, and in no way did I ever think before that I'd had a privileged upbringing, but I had completed my compulsory education. I'd gone on to further education. I had qualifications, employment history, supported friends and family, and these weren't the common experiences of the people that I was sat around. So I was supporting these men who were a lot older than me in just very, very basic maths and English. They weren't stupid, they just haven't had the same opportunities that I had. And I think it's really important to acknowledge and understand the privileges that we had. Sometimes that word makes people feel awkward, but in that circumstance, I realized that those privileges made me stand out like a sore thumb, even for the fact that I hadn't been to prison before, stood me out amongst everybody that I was around. So after I left prison, I volunteered for an organization that was based in East London that was working with young offenders. And over the next 6 years, across the voluntary and statutory sector, I worked on the front line of issues like knife crime, gang violence. I did a lot of work in prisons and did a lot of work around gang exit. But one of the jobs that was most profound to me and changed the trajectory of what I was doing, I was based in the trauma unit of a hospital in East London, And the charity that I was working for, our job was to basically mitigate the fact that these young people, every Monday I would come in, there was a new caseload of 10 to 15 young people that had been stabbed on the weekend. These young people were coming out of theatre, unplugging themselves and going back into the community. So there was no understanding of their risk. There was a high readmission rate, and there was a high case of retaliation incidents. So these young people didn't want to speak to anybody in a uniform. They wouldn't speak to police. They wouldn't speak to the hospital. They'd been presented at hospital either self-presenting or somebody's brought them there, and nobody would know what happened. So the charities that I was working for, they place people with lived experience who understand the backgrounds that these people were coming from, and our job was to connect with them, really to assess risk before they went back into the community. The reason why this was so profound, not just because of the traumatic nature of what I saw right at that most crisis end of what I saw, it was quite extreme, some of those experiences, experiencing death, experiencing the response from parents, both on the victim and perpetrator side. But I got to shift from the frontline experience, the frontline view, to now leading some of the conversations with the multi-agency risk assessment. And what that actually helped me to do was start to see this from a more systemic perspective. And I became really frustrated because I saw actually once that young person is stabbed, we're now leading this multi-agency risk conversation. There's police around the table, there's healthcare, there's medical professionals, there's education, there's the local authority. Everybody sat around the table at point of crisis. But that young person didn't get there by mistake. Also, there's a pattern of the young people that we're seeing with the same race, the same background, the same underlying issues. So for me, I started to explore what is being done to prevent these people from being here in the first place. And there's so many complex issues as to why the ecosystems of support, why the finance all exists at that end. And I won't go into that because that's a whole another thing. And also, neither do I want to make today about a big academic presentation. I want it to be more of a conversation. But for me, that is what drove me to start my own organization. So I founded Paradigm Project in 2020, really because I wanted to create a paradigm shift in the way that we tackle complex youth issues. And the driving question for me was, how far upstream can we go? There's a quote that's attributed to Desmond Tutu, which says, there comes a point when we have to stop pulling bodies out of the water and go further upstream to find out why they're falling in the first place. So I consider the work that I'm doing, both through my organization and academically, as building the fence at the top of the stream. And for want of a better phrase, please excuse me, it's not the sexy end of the problem. It's not the problem, it's not the part of the problem that gets the headlines, and that's not why I'm doing it, but that's what my life work is committed to. So for me, what I'm about to explain today is some of the research that I've been doing, not academically, through my organization. Last year I shared about some of the work that I did at the University of Cambridge. I don't have an academic background. I got into Cambridge because of the research I'd done through my organization. What I did was I wanted to explore exclusion, but school exclusion, we see policies, we see patterns, but what we don't hear is the stories. We don't hear the human pain. We don't understand how it impacts communities. We don't understand how it impacts families. For me, that has to be the starting point. We can't question why policies aren't working if all of our experiences are reduced to statistics and numbers. So the process that I used was to use poetry as a tool of creative expression, and I worked with a group of parents who have had their children excluded from mainstream school. I worked in a youth offender prison with a group of young people who had all been excluded from mainstream school, and also in a crew. And they used poetry to express their stories and what they had been through. And then I held a session with educational leaders to reflect on the poems. And essentially my thesis was about the gaps in the understanding of what was experienced and what we understand. And for me, that has to be the starting point when we truly understand the experiences of how policy can be built. So now I've graduated from my MPhil at Cambridge, and I'm now a doctoral student there, and I'm scaling that study nationally. But I started that in October, and the week that I enrolled was the same week that my wife gave birth to twins. So there's not been very much work on that study so far, hence why I'm not going to talk to you about anything about that. But for the last 18 months, I've been deep in a piece of work that is connected to everything that I just explained. So the question for me was, when we look at school exclusion, we know who the overrepresented groups are. And when I say we know, I'm saying that broadly in what the data shows us. It shows us that Black and minoritized students are overrepresented. It shows us that children with special educational needs and disabilities, SEMH, so social and emotional and mental health, children from care experience backgrounds, and children from low-income families. Of course, that's not an exclusive list, but that's what the data shows us broadly are the most overrepresented groups. So for me, in the beginning of my studies, I was looking a lot around the school-to-prison pipeline, and that a lot of the body of work comes from the US, but I became frustrated with it from an academic perspective because it spends a lot of time saying, can we prove causality from point of exclusion to entering in the criminal justice system? And that part is why I struggle to call myself an academic, because I don't want to create work to argue with other academics or to put recommendations inside a paper that never get acted on. In fact, the term that I feel like I've settled with is a pracademic. For me, the research has to move practice forwards. And that's the only reason why I'm doing the research, so I can move my practice forward. So actually, one of my funders reached out to me and said, "I've heard about the work you're doing around the school-to-prison pipeline. We'd really like to support you and give you some funding to do some more work around that subject." And I said to them, actually, I've explored that end of the pipeline, and I want to ask, if we know who those groups are, why aren't we looking much further upstream and finding out what's the earliest possible point we can intervene? So this piece of research explored 4 early educational transitions. So the beginning point was early years into reception, reception into year 1, key stage 1 to key stage 2, and then primary to secondary school. So throughout the presentation, I will share a little bit more about what we learned through those transition points. So this quote here, "I was scared. I told my mum I was okay. I wasn't okay." Most of the work that our organization has done over the last 5 to 6 years has been focused around the primary to secondary school transition, and it's only through this piece of research that we've started to look more comprehensively at the other transition points. But this quote is really simple, but for me what it reveals is a difference in perception between what children experience, what parents are told, and also what we think as adults and educators, what children are experiencing through transition points. Actually, last year's summer was the first time, so I always believe that, you know, we can't address with things on a surface level. So I can't just talk to a child about transitions without ignoring the other contexts in which they exist, which means that we also have to have provision where we're addressing the parents, where we're working with the community, the other spaces in which they exist to understand the full picture. And by mistake, last summer, I ended up doing a transition session with parents and children together. We'd always done it separately, but we was in this situation where the person that I was working with, they had put the groups together. And I was reluctant at first, thinking, how is this going to work? But actually, what it led to was a deeper level of understanding, because where we got to discussing the things like worries and concerns, the things that people were looking forward to, there was such wide gaps between what the children were experiencing, or even what they had told their parents, and then there were things that parents were worried about that the children didn't know. And sometimes it's that communication between the two, not to say that parents don't try to communicate with their children about these topics, but there's a deeper understanding that needs to be had. And transition points are inflection points. They represent points along a child's journey where we can pause, we can understand what has happened before, we can plan, empower and equip and prepare them for what is happening next. So again, this is similar to what I said, the same children, generation after generation. As I explained, my starting point was looking at exclusion. We also see those same vulnerable groups overrepresented in the criminal justice system. And if we go before that, if we go before the point of exclusion, those same groups are also overrepresented in low educational attainment. So if we know that those groups are experiencing those things at that end of the pipeline, and it's happening generation after generation, but all of our solutions are interventions at point of crisis,
things often in our system, whether it's education, whether it's the statutory systems that support children, start at the point of a problem. Once there's a label associated with a child, then we can get support. Once a child is at risk of exclusion, they can get a mentor. We don't really want to do prevention. And even a lot of what I see spoken about as prevention is actually early intervention. There's a clear difference. For me, prevention starts way before the problem. It starts in the primary school. It starts through the birth process. It starts about how prepared are you to support this child? What do we need to provide to support you? How can we connect you with community? How can we connect you with services? That's what prevention looks like. So these are I'm jumping through the slides here, by the way. So I'm saying stuff that are on different slides. So the question was not how do we fix children in crisis, but how did the children we meet at the end of the pipeline get there? So we look upstream earlier than the system usually looks at the life history behind the outcome. And again, you heard me say that in my master's research that I centered the voice of the parent and the child because that's missing. That's missing in our dialogue. That's missing in our understanding of the problem. And that also is an important point. I briefly mentioned it to Stephen earlier. It's like, what do we value as knowledge in our society and in our community? Because when we look at how, at a government level, they write policies, do they really value the stories, the voices, and the experience of the people who are going through it? Or are they just interpreting the data from a helicopter position and then projecting processes and policy on us, and then we wonder why it doesn't fit? For me, the questions are back to front. So the 4 transitions, you can flip to the next stage. So early years to reception, the first big step into school, and each of these points, as we searched through them, had really interesting elements, which I'll get a little bit more into. Reception into year 1, and key stage 1 to key stage 2. These 2 are really interesting because they're what I describe as invisible transitions because they happen within the same context. So early years into reception is one where there's a lot of variability because some children may have been in private nursery, some children may have been in state-funded nursery, some children may have been in no previous provision before and then come straight into reception. So what reception are dealing with is a wide variety of children from a mixture of demographics, but reception is all geared towards the concept of school readiness. And this was something that came up a lot in the research is, what does that actually mean? What does school readiness mean? And one of the experts that we interviewed as part of the research said, in her opinion, that school readiness is actually about compliance, is about preparing a child to be compliant to the system that they're in. Instead, we should be asking, is the school ready to receive the variety of children that are coming into the environment? So that was a really interesting point that came from there. And those 2 transitions in the middle, like I said, because they're invisible, they're not dealt with in the same way that the others are. So if you go to the next slide, what I want us to do is thinking of those 4 transitions, and as I give you the task, I'll flick back to the last slide. Which of those 4, and we've already established there's lots of parents in the room, so I know that this one isn't going to fall on dead ears. Which of the 4 of those transitions was hardest for your child to navigate, and which one did your child's school support the best? I want you to do it in small groups of 2 or 3 people, so if you need to move about. I'll give you 5 minutes to have that, and then I'll ask for some people to reflect. Can you go back a slide? Yeah. No, to the transitions one. No. Forward. Yeah, that one. So the questions are, what was the toughest for your child? And yeah, which one did your child's school support the best? Okay, I'll give you 1 more minute to finish up. Decide who is going to feed back to the group. So I just need one person from each group to give us some of your responses, please. Huh? Good. Okay. All right, who would like to share first? You can either shout from where you are or come up and use the mic, whatever you prefer. Hand at the back, yep. All right, guys, let's listen. So we've got...
Transition from primary to secondary was a huge jump for them. Mm-hmm. But even within secondary, transition from year 9 to 10 was another huge jump. And then from GCSE to A-level. So it looks like at secondary, it doesn't really stop. It's from one stage to the other.
Of course.
And I think it's similar with, my 2 parents here as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So I didn't even realize what was happening to the child, that the child wasn't being stimulated at all in the class. Maybe that's why he was kind of misbehaving. Mm-hmm. Secondary school, the same thing happened all through. And I was just thinking, how come it's only you? Why all this problem with you? Now he's working, the same thing. And I'm just thinking, okay, maybe this child is not being stimulated the way he should be. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's for me, I was helpless. Now I know, but at that time, I was just getting the stick out. It wasn't a stick business. It was understanding how to support this child through that process. Yeah. I was just saying to my colleagues here on the table that he's working now. By 1 o'clock, he's finished the day's work. Mm-hmm. People are being sacked on that job. You know, people don't understand. I'm just thinking, the way his brain works, I'd have to understand it. He's 29 now, and I'm still struggling to understand that. But thank God he didn't get into trouble. He had a sting that he got into trouble one time, but he didn't go full on. You know, we kind of rescued him from that. But it's just the way his brain works, I think it's a bit hard for me to understand and support him in that process.
Okay, thank you. Let's go with one more person, someone over this side of the room. Anyone else? Anyone from this table? Okay.
And he was the only black child in that class. So he was frightened of going to school. Okay. You know, but luckily, he still remembers the teacher that eased him in, Mrs. Williams. Mm-hmm. She just kind of adopted him as her child and tried to ease him into school. I, as a parent, what was my own? Go to school and go to school. I've dropped you off in school. You should be able to adapt. But with hindsight, I should have given him more support at that stage. And he never really liked school. But today, he has a master's degree and he's working. He still says school is a scam. He would learn without going to school. He hates the 4 walls of schools. He hates them.
Thank you. They're really honest and open reflections, because I think one of the first things we all realize as parents is when you become a parent, you realize actually that there's no blueprint, that my parents were doing the best with the circumstances they had, trying to do better than what was done before them, working with the resources that they have. And we all are existing within those same capacity. I think it's really important. And I always say, you know, with the teams that I work with, whenever we're facing a problem or an issue, let us begin by turning the lens inwards first. And I think even culturally, I come from a very strict Jamaican household. My dad is Jamaican and also a pastor, so it was double strict in my house, you know. And it was like, you're a child, I'm the adult. There was no such thing as listening or understanding. It's what I say goes. And I think, yes, we are in a generation where there's this cultural conflict almost between these are the rules that were established when we were brought up, and some of them have helped us to have the principles and the values of which we highly value and make us into who we are and have established the communities of which we existed. But I think there's also something in there that's powerful when we acknowledge that there, as well as there's things that we need to learn, there's also things that we need to unlearn. And that starts with honest conversations with ourselves. So thank you for all of those reflections. So we began by centering the voice, like I said, of children and parents. So we ran focus groups with children in year 6. We ran focus groups with children in year 7 and with their parents. And that session was actually recorded on BBC Crime Watch, which was a great experience. And then we did interviews with 12 experts that represented the vulnerable groups that I mentioned, so SEND, low-income families, et cetera, and also we surveyed 100 safeguarding professionals from across the country, which I covered in that slide. So these were some of the key findings that came out of the research. So transitions do not create the problem, they reveal it. So vulnerability builds quietly across the years before a move, often unseen. The transition is simply where it lands. So in our survey, 73% of professionals named primary to secondary school as the highest risk point. But when we asked why, all of their answers pointed backwards. So the reason why I'm focused on those early transitions and not later on in secondary school, when I work with children at that other end of the pipeline, when it comes to knife crime or school exclusion, when you start connecting with the families, when you start to look at the records and put all of the pieces of the puzzle together, it started a long time ago. So really what we see at the primary to secondary school transition is accumulated unmet need. So that was something that came out clearly through the research. So risk does not reset at transition. Safeguarding practice often does. And this is one of my big frustrations with how the education system works is in primary schools, there's often a high sense of bond capital. There's, even the type of relationship where teachers might hug a child. That might be the only physical connection that child gets. They might check in and there's a lot of care and play. And then they might go to a secondary school where they have a zero tolerance policy and we don't understand the impact that they might have on that child. But deeper than that, for me, one of the key issues is what is lost. That primary school, typically they will know that child very well because they've just spent the last 6 years with them. But then they go into secondary school and we're trying to figure out who they are again. And if that's a child who has experienced complex situations or who has some of those vulnerabilities that I mentioned, by the time they work out who the child is, there's often already a problem or a label that has been associated with them. So the second key finding was the system moves documents, not children. So there is the technology to pass on the information. One of the other things that was really revealing is even within the same borough, you could have one secondary school on this side of the street and another secondary school on the other side of the street that deal with transition in a completely different way. So they all have their own practices. Some of it is done excellently. Some primary schools start the transition process right from the beginning of year 6. They invite parents in, they have transition days, and that's reflected also with the secondary school. But it almost feels like a lottery depending on where you apply. You don't actually know what the experience is of the recipient school until you get in there. What is presented to you is just, in a way, it's kind of advertising. The secondary school's job is to put their best foot forwards. And I think that's not knocking the efforts and work of the school, but I think there is definitely some development that needs to happen in how we can more effectively support, and not even standardize, but support the most vulnerable children. We need to have a greater understanding of what information needs to be handed over, not just at point of crisis, but in a more preventative way. I can use this clicker. I'm a technology dinosaur, so this will confuse me. Behavior is usually misread need, not bad character. To me, this is a given one. What looks like low effort can be a child who cannot process what they are hearing. What looks like defiance can be a child overwhelmed since the first unmanaged moment of the morning. When we read behavior as character, we punish the child for the need we failed to meet. So some of the really interesting findings came at that transition from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2, where a child is between the age of 6 to 7. So there were 2 experts that we spoke to that had some really interesting insight. So one of them was a lady called Dr. Charlotte Davis, and she's a sound and motor processing expert. And she said that that's a critical window for sound and motor process development, the age of 6 to 7. There should be certain milestones that a child reaches. So a lot of what could be perceived as disruptive behavior can be attributed to those things. And it's something that is completely not acknowledged within the education system. So a lot of her work, I'd encourage you to go and you can find her on LinkedIn, Dr. Charlotte Davis. She does a lot of work around sound and motor process. And actually what she does is advocate for young people at the crisis end of the pipeline, saying, look, they don't even have this basic skill, so how was they able to process X, Y, and Z? And the other lady was a lady called Frances Akinde, who is one of the leading SEND advisors in the country, especially when it comes to SEND intersecting with Black identity. And our conversation led to her talking about all of the transitions that we're addressing in this research are macro transitions. They're big transition points, even if some of them are less recognized than the others. But what she said is, for a SEND student, they're navigating micro transitions throughout the day. So the movements between classroom to classroom, from the playground back into the class, even from home into the school, all of those micro transitions have significant impact on a SEND child. So that's important to consider. And the fourth one was one trusted adult who knows the child is the strongest protection, which is exactly what you said in your example. And this is, in a way, sometimes this is why research is frustrating, because the findings should very rarely shock us, right? This feels like common sense. One trusted adult who knows the child. We know that how important relationship is. But what does that mean? How can a supportive voice stay with the child? How can we provide consistency for the child? How can we make sure that's not dependent on systems that are broken? So across every part of the research, the most consistent protective factor was the same. One adult who knew the child and stayed knowing them across the move. Not a perfect system, not flawless paperwork, a relationship held by a named person carried across the boundary. And a great example of that was a primary school, a Van Gogh primary school in Brixton. We ended up doing a case study on them because they have a dedicated family support worker. So their head teacher is a black lady called Nadine Bernard, and she's an incredible leader. She also runs an organization called Aspire Education Group, where she supports black leaders into senior leadership across primary and secondary education. But she really advocated for this role. She didn't have funding for it. She had to source funding herself so that she could have the family support worker. And why that's important is because in schools, you have pastoral leads, you have people that take on those type of responsibilities, but normally it's just the add-on. They have teaching responsibilities. They have the same amount of paperwork to mark as everybody else. So that job then, not to say that they don't have the intentions to do it well, but they don't have the dedicated time, the protected time to be able to do it effectively. So I'm gonna cut it short because I've got like 20 slides. But what we didn't want to just finish the research and make it into recommendations, like I said. So what we have developed is an intersectional safeguarding framework which creates joint up thinking across those 4 early educational transitions. On the 9th of July, we have a closed national briefing where there's some leading funders, MPs from education, where we're gonna launch our framework. And for me, I really believe that this is gonna make a significant difference. We've created tools within the framework, such as a transition passport, which captures the voice of the parent. It captures the voice of the child throughout the journey. So hopefully, when I come back next year, I'll be able to share with you how that has been implemented and how it's worked. But thank you for having me, and congratulations again so much.
Interesting information there with regards to just how, children are having to. So there was something that you said. You said it was a quote that came up to introduce the next. Hello.
Where you were talking about the transition, where they get lost in the system. And so my question is, so we know that is a problem. So what is the solution? What can you proffer, not just to parents, but also to teachers? Because I'm also an educator as well as a parent with an SEN child. What would you proffer as a solution for those gaps in transition? You were talking specifically about, the hugging bit. Mm-hmm. So my son went through primary school. He had his teachers, they will hug him and all of that. He's an SEN child. Mm-hmm. He got to secondary and it's a completely no hands. Nobody knows him. He's just a number, a cog in the system. So in those periods of micro transitions, what would you offer as a solution, not just to parents, but also to educators?
Yeah, so specifically when we're talking about send and transition, we have to understand the nuanced experiences that they have. So the context that the parent will have, the context that the parent will have in understanding their needs is really important. But unfortunately and unfairly, a lot of the responsibility in those situations falls on the parent. So the recipient school of where your child is going to, again, like I said, what is presented in paperwork in terms of what we see in their policy, what we see in their SEND policies, is really important for you to interrogate that, to explore it, to understand it. But I would advise you to, if you could find ways to talk to parents, to talk to people that's in the school. But one of the things that I think is critical beyond kind of doing that surface level research or investigation, if you like, is to find out what your rights are and how to communicate effectively. Because people wait until there is an incident or until there's a problem, and then they need to fix something and they don't know how to communicate. And that's because, I'm not saying they don't know how to speak from a basic level, but I'm talking about the legalities and the processes. So every local authority will have their own SEND processes and policies and procedures. If you find out those things in advance, okay, so who can I refer to? What services are available? What funding is available if my child doesn't have an EHCP? So then you can ask the designated safeguarding lead in the school. So for me, it's about having a proactive approach. And it's a shame to use this language, but it's about arming yourself with everything that you need first before incidents arise. We've done a whole heap of work specifically on SEND and transition into primary school, and I think, a lot of the work exists with the parents, but it shouldn't be that way. The school should be more understanding. I think the teachers that are in the secondary schools, they don't have the capacity to do the extra work that's required. They need to be better supported. There needs to be the specific dedicated staff to support them to understand who the child is, not just what the paperwork says. So yeah, there's a lot that I could say. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll be happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much for that. So I just want to use this opportunity to let you know that we do have copies of the book, which we're going to be launching after this summit. So get your copy, everybody. And also, just to remind you about the raffle, I hope everybody's managed to get a raffle ticket. So I would like to present our next speaker for today. So we have Uloma Ogundoro. Uloma Ogundoro is going to give us a wonderful talk about online safety. Please come up, Uloma. Give a round of applause, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone for having me and welcome. I feel like a lot of what Joel said is what I'm basically going to repeat, but from a different aspect. And first of all, I work as a public health nurse. I work within schools, and I'm privileged, I'll say I'm privileged to see a lot of young people in reception, primary school, and all the way to secondary school, even all the way to sixth forms as well, and colleges that we cover. So, so what we're going to talk about today basically is about healthy relationships and, digital boundaries and safety, managing tough conversations. I can see a lot of discussions that we've been having about us as parents being able to speak to our children and us being that person that they can come to when they need to talk. Protecting our children online, and then just some information. So there are different types of relationships, that we all have, even as adults. We have friends, teacher to student relationship, romantic relationships, parent versus child, and then we've got siblings as well. So we are always in a relationship. Whether you realize it or not, you are in some sort of relationship. And things can actually escalate quite quickly from the online to the real world, even as adults. And it's very, very, I said to Choma, sometimes she says to me, oh, Uloma, you have so much information. I'm going to add you to this group. I'm like, or assessment, and I driving home, I would always say, let's do what and they hear this from like reception all the way till they're older. And then, then they get older, get into a relationship, and then their partners are saying, you're not communicating. But I don't know what we're expecting, because they've never been communicating from when they were younger. And this is a problem. Build that trust, build trust through consistency, empathy, and reliability, listening actively and validating their feelings. Make them feel that if your boy child comes up to you and tells you, Mom, I had a hard day today, acknowledge it. And then talk about it. Because for them to come and tell you that means a lot, right? Teach conflict resolution. Do you remember there was I think it's about 2-3 years ago now, there was a young lady that got stabbed in Croydon. And she was trying to protect her friend. She wasn't even the main character, but she was there trying to protect her friend. So I sat my 2 boys down and I told them the story. They were like, rolling their eyes, and I sat them down. I explained the whole process to them. So I said, I gave them a scenario. And I said, if you were in a relationship, you liked a girl, and you bought her gifts, and you had so many lovely things to share with her, and then she rejected you, what would you do? My first son he just shrugged his shoulders. He was indifferent. My second son said, she'll give me back everything. I said to myself, that's the Igbo spirit coming out. He said, she will give me back every single thing that I've given to her. I said, why would you do that? He said, because it's mine. If she doesn't like me, then she needs to give me back what I gave to her. And that was so interesting. Yeah. And teach your children how to ask for help. You know, I saw a child just literally yesterday, and I said to her, you know, have you spoken to anybody about this? And she said, no. And I said, why? She said, I don't trust the teachers. And I said, but what about your mom? And then she was like, you know, and we had to kind of try to unpick that. And I can't do that in just 20, 30 minutes health assessment, you know? We just have to have time for our children. So the digital boundaries, navigating sex, education, and safety. Using appropriate language, you know? Not telling our children, you know, a penis is a pee-pee, a vagina is a VV, this is a Didi, a Mimi, a Lolo. You know, say it as it is. Last year, before I started my session last year, I made everybody say sex. There is nothing wrong with sex. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. We're all engaging in it, and there are young people engaging in it. As a health professional, I have the license to give a contraception to a 13-year-old. Would you believe that? Right? As long as I deemed her mature enough, I can give her contraception. And her parents wouldn't know that. So she's engaging in sexual activity, basically. Right? So discussing like consent, respect, body autonomy, telling them, you know, people can't just touch you. People can't just, you know, even as an adult, I remember, you know, when I was a lot younger, I was in uni, and we used to go like clubbing or go to like the bars or lounges, and we'll be walking or dancing or whatever. People will just pull you, touch you. If you like someone, say it. You don't need to touch me. You don't need to try to rub your body against me. You know, I'm so glad to see that things are improving, but there are still problems out there, you know. And these are examples of how people can get involved in so many issues. Encouraging critical thinking, social media, online content, peer pressure, you know. It was a few days ago, Choma posted something of how the number of children that had died up till 2026 from social media, cyberbullying. It was, I was just looking and, you know, I was watching it and I was thinking, okay, this is probably about a 30-second video. It was going and going and going, and I was like, it's a lot. It's a lot. Using parental controls and privacy settings, you know. And then safe connections, yeah? Teach your children how to identify scams. Recently I had a training about gambling, and they were talking about how many children get involved with gambling. I'm telling you, it's no joke. 6-year-olds are buying skin. Is it skin? Or I don't know if you know the game on Roblox. What, sorry? Sin, yeah. So they're buying outfits for their online character. Some of these kids are taking their parents' credit cards. They're taking, you know, racking up the bills because, you know, it becomes so addictive, you know. Encouraging them to report suspicious behavior. I can't tell you how many young people that I've seen, especially girls, who have told me that somebody's done something inappropriate to them and they're just scared to report it. Or they don't want to get the person into trouble, you know. Monitoring their well-being, their screen time. Sometimes I'm walking across the street or whatever, and I'll see babies in buggies and their parents have just given them that and put a little bottle of milk, like, you know, you're sorted. You know, these are like babies. Yeah? So we talked about that. And then also we've talked a little bit about that as well. So age-appropriate advice. So like from 5 to 8, you focus on basic privacy and trusted adults, which is so important. Discussing gaming for 9-year-olds to 12-year-olds, messaging and cyberbullying, right? There's a specific police force that is responsible for navigating online issues, right? But the CEOP, they're called CEOP, but the earlier you can report it, the better. But some of these things, schools are dealing with it. Recently, one of my schools, a girl had shared, I believe it was her breasts, to her friend. I don't know what the context was. This friend shared it in a WhatsApp group. WhatsApp group. Now, the girl in question is self-harming because now everybody in the whole school has seen her breasts. You know, it's awful. 13 to 17-year-old, you explore relationships, like I said, consent and digital footprint is the most important thing. Even as an adult, what are you liking online? You know, there's a track record. People can find out. There was a police officer the other day. He was liking a video of somebody that was being very, very racist and disrespectful to a black child. And he liked that video. And someone sort of like called him up on that. So a lot of black people now navigated to his, to his page to try and disrespect him and say all sorts of things. I don't know if you lot have seen, I believe it's in China. There's a thing trending at the moment that's squishy black dolls that they do all sorts of things. It's awful, awful. You know, it's awful to watch. And they're not just doing this online. I can't tell you the amount of these communities that are going to Africa, not to do charity work, but to actually go to Africa because the parents don't have any money. They're abusing the children, they're recording it, they're putting it online to entertain sadists, like people that are, I don't know, that's just another topic for another day. Yeah, so we've talked about a little bit. So this says that 1 in 3 children globally report experiencing cyberbullying. There's a project that we're currently doing in my place of work. It's called the Lancaster Model. So basically what we do, we go into schools, give children questionnaires to fill out. So reception, mostly filled out by their parents. And then we go in year 9, and then, reception and year 9, because there was a research that was done and they were going to target those age groups. And we asked them questions about life, health, emotional well-being, and da-da-da-da. One of my schools, which is a Catholic school, 90% of the answers and questionnaires, referrals that came back were based on a campaign about bullying. You know, girls are mean. People are mean out there. You know, and these are children that are going through this. Sometimes they come home, they can't talk to you. They're struggling within, and they're trying to carry this burden by themselves. Mind you, that school, last year alone, is a Catholic school. I had 3.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, almost afternoon, actually. I just want to say a quick thank you. Thank you to everybody who's here today. So today is a really special day. I am launching my book, but also really excited that I have, people that have traveled far and wide to be here today. So I just want to say thank you. But just to introduce Stephen. So Stephen and I go way back. So I met Stephen when I was 19. I'd not long arrived in the UK. We were going to a local church, himself and his wife. But Stephen has tirelessly for the last 30 years campaigned in his work as a criminal defense barrister for 30 years. So yeah, he has spent some time in the Turks and Caicos Island. I remember, I'm sure you enjoyed that, right? Traveling every week or something. That's right. But he's really worked in a number of cases. And actually, Stephen just said to me, you know the girl that was stabbed in Croydon? Did you say you were just messaging the mom? Because Stephen was in Croydon. And so Stephen has tirelessly campaigned helping to eradicate youth violence. So of course we know summertime, there's a lot that goes on. And so Stephen makes these videos every time, just helping young people, but also parents to support their young people to reduce crime and help parents understand. So yeah, so he's got a lot of accolades. But as I said, his LBE was for his contribution services to preventing knife crime, but also serious youth violence. So, and Stephen was recognized last week, right? So this is like off the press, because I think like we're the second people recognizing you, right? So we just want to take a moment to just celebrate Stephen. So Stephen, please come up. And just gonna. Thank you.
his mic is coming on. I think there's a...
Ah, there you go. Thank you. So I won't need that.
No.
Okay.
So does he need it?
we need this for the room.
Oh, for the room. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's my second year attending. And every year I say this. I wish there were more people in the room. I know that there are people online, but the information that you're getting, these are real nuggets of wisdom. And our community needs to hear these messages because I'm at the other end of the spectrum. And sadly, those who don't hear the message meet people like me. And then they're reliant on people like me to get their young people out of the mess that they're in. And I always say, look, I'm a good lawyer. I've been at it for 34 years, but I'm not a magician. And I tell the youngsters when I speak to them, why would you play Russian roulette with your life? And by that I mean, why would you, first of all, make a wrong choice, then secondly, rely on 12 people who don't know you, who read papers and see things online and maybe form judgments about people who look like you, and you're going to put your life in their hands. And I say to all of you in the room, you will never understand what it sounds like to hear the screams of a mother from the public gallery at the Central Criminal Court, otherwise called the Old Bailey, where a young person hears those words, or the word guilty. Guilty of murder. It's something that haunts me. And so that's what has inspired me for certainly the last 3 decades to do what I do outside the courtroom, because as Joel said, I'm tired of seeing them fall in, and I want to go upstream to prevent it happening. Because the criminal justice system is effectively like any other thing. People are employed within it. It's almost like a business. And our children disproportionately are being affected. Young men, young women being incarcerated, being robbed of their dream. And it's even worse now with social media. I remember, and because it came up when Oluma was speaking, I remember sitting in the Hilton Hotel in Croydon. I'm from Croydon. I grew up in Croydon, went to school in Croydon. I still live in the borough of Croydon. And I remember getting a call from my friend saying, you need to meet someone on Friday. And bearing in mind, this was just a day after her daughter had been murdered. And I remember sitting in the hotel, me, Dorcas, that's the mum's name, and my friend, and we sat there, and she kept saying, I've lost my best friend. And I remember just sitting there and just crying. And we prayed together, and it was just heartbreaking. And Eliane wanted to be a lawyer, and I would have loved to have mentored that young lady. So I haven't got long, and I'm going to fly through this, but I usually don't make my presentations available after. But because I have to go somewhere else and I'm going to fly through this, I will make this available. These are nuggets of wisdom that parents need to have. It's not about protecting your information, it's about sharing it. And I've called this 2 crossings because these are crucial times for a young person, and much of this overlaps from what the previous speakers have said, how we keep our children safe. But I remember even as a child of the 70s in Thornton Heath, the fear I felt. We talked about transition, we talked about change, but no one talks about fear, the uncertainty, because that's how I felt. Making that transition from primary to secondary, a new uniform, different friends, more people in the class, a completely different environment. And you can imagine in the 70s, my twin sister and I were the only black children in the class in the 70s. So you can imagine what that was like. And then there's the second crossing, which is sixth form to university. And I'm the father of two sons, Daniel and Noah, and I've been through this journey. And one thing that I do know, and I see there's one dad in the room, maybe more. One thing I do know, and I speak from a male perspective, you have to sacrifice yourself and sometimes your own ambitions if you're really, really determined to see or do your best to make sure that your children don't fall into that gap, that hole. And I did it. I allowed my wife to flourish professionally. And you know, it's in African culture, perhaps sometimes the man feels like he must always lead and he must always be in the spotlight. But I took a different view. I took the view that both of us had very good jobs. My wife's job required her flying all over the world for various things. And I was happy to stay at home. I was happy to stay at home and make sure that my boys saw me ever present. And I would say even now that they're young men, on my deathbed, no son of mine will ever say you were not there. I was at every event, every football match, every school drama, every play, you name it, I was there. My wife recently came back from Vietnam with the boys. They went on holiday, and I said to her, the reason why I want you to go and I'm not going, because I've made memories with these boys for years, and you've had very limited time to make really, really special memories. Go and make your memories. So here we go. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is really true that you have secondary school, sixth form, and then university stroke work, and what I call the development gap and the risk. So risk in a young life is not evenly spread. It clusters at the moment a child steps into a bigger, less supervised world before their judgment has caught up. The brain's accelerator, it's hunger for reward, status and peer approval. It races ahead in the teenage years. And then what I call the brakes, impulse control and judgment, and they're not fully wired until they're in their mid-20s. So it's really, really important. It's a really important stage for young people, because certainly when they're teenagers, first of all, they think they're invincible. They make wrong decisions, and their brains are not fully developed. Whether we like it or not, their brains are not fully developed. Now, sadly, over 3 decades or so, I've been involved in 30 murder cases. Most of them increasingly now are young people, and the youngest person I've represented for attempted murder was 12. And I remember starting back in the early 90s where I wouldn't see many Nigerian names on the board in the criminal courts. And now there are awash with Nigerian names. So those of us in our community think, our boys don't do this. It affects all youngsters, including Nigerian children, African children, West Indian children, European. It's a real issue, and we have to recognize it. 49,000 knife-enabled offenses in a single year, 172 knife homicides in a year, and even though the figures have dropped, that's not an excuse to become complacent. 30% recorded by the Metropolitan Police, and as we know, the violence concentrates mostly in our cities. Under 25 is the age group most affected, and I can vouch for that because I have seen it. Most of the cases I get involved in are those who are under 25 years of age. So we've got the primary stage. As I said, I won't spend too long on this. A bigger school, older pupils, new world. You're taking the train or the bus to school. You might be allowed to have a mobile phone, and then you meet new people. And I've said that in the first doors that danger can walk through, because obviously with that transition, they're exposed to new things. Young people certainly have this perception sometimes because of that transition into secondary school where sometimes they're scared and they think, oh, carrying a knife will protect me, I'm never going to use it. But they don't understand that if you even carry a knife or carry a weapon, and I've dealt with youngsters from very good homes. I've even represented the son of a pastor. So let's not pretend that my child is immune. It can happen to anyone, and that's what's always kept me grounded, that even me and the relative comfort that I've raised my children in, it could happen to me. And so I've never been complacent about it. Because once you let them out of that front door, they're exposed to everything. And so we have to be alive to it. Young people don't understand that it takes seconds. You don't have to plan it. I mean, the number of young people I've spoken to said that there was no plan. I felt threatened. I pulled out a knife. I stabbed someone. And they always think there's a safe place to stab someone. That always amazes me because they don't know the anatomy of the body. So, you know, if you stab someone in the leg and you hit the femoral artery, it's game over. And they don't understand it. And the number of cases I've dealt with where people have carried a knife and thought, I only poked him with the knife, but they hit a major vessel, and that young person bled out, and then that other young person is then on trial for murder, and their life is ruined. So carrying knife for protection, it's a myth. The other thing that really worries me is this thing called joint enterprise. I did a talk just 2 days ago at St. Thomas the Apostle College in Peckham. And I go there regularly, and I was there talking to the youngsters, all the year 9s, and I was amazed that many of them did not know what joint enterprise was. And I explained it to them. 1 or 2 got it right, but I explained it to them. I said, joint enterprise is the single piece of legislation, the most single piece of legislation that's ruining young lives. Because many of our young people congregate and meet in certain places, not knowing fully what's going on around them, or someone in their number is carrying a weapon. Something happens because someone has beef about this or that, or a postcode or something that was posted online. Someone has a moment of madness, pulls out a weapon, someone gets stabbed, the police turn up, round up everybody. And the number of cases I've been involved in where there's actually one principal person who's carried a weapon and used it, but then you have 6 or 7 other people standing alongside them in the courtroom charged with the same offense because of joint enterprise. And it comes back to my whole story of why would you play Russian roulette with your life? Because the minute you're in the system will manipulate itself to include you. And these are our children. These are the next generation who are slowly but surely being watered down and taken out of the system. Any of you who ever had the chance to go to a place like Feltham, when I come out of that place, I told you, and I don't go there often anymore, but when I used to come out of that place, I used to cry. I'm not embarrassed to cry. I've been crying all my life. And I used to weep tears when I saw the number of young black boys in that place. Young boys who potentially, if they had been steered right, or if they had had more engagement at a very early age, and this is why I talk about fathers, because we can blame the system for a lot of things, but our biggest investment is not in a new car. I turned up today in my 25-year-old Honda CR-V, and I love that car. My wife says it's a source of embarrassment to her when I say, let's go out for dinner. Oh, this has gone off, but I can talk loudly. I'm used to it. So, yeah, it's a source of it. But, you know, what are we investing in? Are we investing in looking good? Are we investing in going to the next party? Are we investing in the latest watch or being seen here and there? These are the real conversations we need to have. Because if we're not keeping our eyes on the real prize, the blessing we've been given, which is our children, guess what's going to happen? When the system gets hold of them, you're in trouble. So they have to understand joint enterprise. They live in a world where they are filming things. Everything is recorded. A number of things I see on Instagram that make my blood boil when you see people involved in fighting or disputes, and everyone's there with their phone filming it like it's a source of entertainment. And I just get so mad, not realizing that sometimes you could be complicit in what's being filmed. The next thing that you have to be aware of, something called county lines. Again, they weren't aware of that, some of these youngsters. I dealt with a young man who was involved in county lines. He was running a line from here in London all the way down to Somerset. And he eventually got arrested and he got a prison sentence. But in the most extreme cases, a young man who I represented was involved in a murder case because he was involved in county lines. The rival drug dealer kicked the door in. He was there minding the property with the drugs in it for his drug dealer in London. The drugs got stolen, and in the fracas, that young man had to do what he needed to do and stab the other person 27 times. 18 years of age, life sentence, minimum tariff, 33 years. And I remember going down to see this boy. I spent 13 weeks with this young man at Winchester Crown Court. And I built up a rapport with him, and I got into his background. He'd been a troubled young boy since he was 6. Why? Because his dad was not present. And one of the most heartbreaking things, when I broke down this boy after about 9 weeks in, and one day I went down to see him, he looked at me, and I could see the tears welling up in his eyes, and he said, "Sir," and then he hugged me. He said, "I wish you were my dad." He said, "You've shown me more love, more interest than my own biological father had done. And if I had met you maybe in a different time, I wouldn't have made the choices I made." Heartbreaking. 6,500 drug lines operating across the UK. There's about 15,500 or 15,500 children estimated at risk of criminal exploitation. And it's usually that crucial age of 15 to 17. And you know how it works? Depending on where you live, someone befriends your child. Someone then says, "Look, I can offer you X, Y, and Z. Those trainers maybe that you want, or even if someone's coming from, tough socioeconomic background, I'll buy you some food, no problem." And then following on from that, there's a little thing I need you to do for me. "Yeah, what's that? You see this package? Yeah, I want you to run it down on the train. You can even wear your uniform. You can skip school because no one's going to really bother checking who you are." And that's how it starts. And then sometimes what they do, because they're so wicked, they'll arrange for that young person to be robbed by their own crew so that you are in debt. You're in bondage to them. That's how it works. And then you're trapped in this cycle of drugs and knives, and eventually you could end up losing your life, robbed of what you could have been. So yeah, the other thing, my big bugbear, is weed. I hate cannabis. I hate the smell of it. I hate what it does to young people. I've been to many institutions to visit people, including the one over in West Wickham there. And I remember walking on the ward, and I was just shocked, seeing young men walking around like in a zombie state. Many young men, young black men, walking around in a zombie state because of drug-induced psychosis. And I keep telling these kids when I see them, and they say it's only a bit of weed. The weed that the Rastas used to smoke in the Blue Mountains, or even the Rastafarians here in the early days, it's not the same weed. This is synthetic stuff that is made, has all sorts of harmful chemicals in, and affects a brain that is underdeveloped. I have a case now with a Nigerian boy who's charged with a very serious offense with a weapon, and it was drug-induced psychosis. And when I was reading his medical records, a young man who took his first puff when he was about 13 or 14, only took one hit, drug-induced psychosis. He's in a mental health institution somewhere up north, and I remember speaking to him, and he was at the last time completely incoherent, talking a whole load of gibberish, and I'm thinking, wow, how did this happen? So social media, I won't spend too long on that because we all know the perils of social media. It is the playground for predators, whether it's people trying to get you to do illicit things, either sexual, even the gambling that someone talked about. All of these things are real. I don't want to rehash or repeat what's been said before. They are all very, very real. And as I say, none of us are immune. I remember my son he's studying up in Nottingham. And my wife came to me and said, I just got a letter from the bank, from his bank. But when he's away, we open his mail. And he's talking about someone tried to put £7,000 in his account. So I phoned him. I said, what's this? He said, I don't know anything about this. He said, someone asked me to do them a favor at university, and I thought it was someone I could trust. I don't know whose money it is. I said, I'm closing the account down. I said, let it be the last time that anyone asks you a favor. And if necessary, I'll come up there and I'll show them what a favor is. Yeah? So it's real. Belonging is a biological need. We've talked about this in adolescence. The brain weights peer approval more heavily than personal safety. You always hear this, everybody's doing it, which is really very true. Teenagers take markedly more risks simply when other teenagers are watching. So it's really important, and it all comes back to this thing about relationship. What kind of relationship have you got with your children? And you can't start that relationship in their teens. You can't. As I said to you, I made a point of starting this relationship with my boys. And in our culture, where we say, I'm the parent, you're the child, you're not my friend. My sons are my friends. But there's a respect. There's a level of respect, even now that they're almost men, or they are men. They're bigger than me, they're stronger than me. But there is a level of respect that they have. And that started from 2 years old, where we would be together constantly, and I'd be constantly asking them, what's on your mind? What troubles you? Investing in them, always having time. They come into my office, even when I'm working on a case. Dad, I'll put the case down. What is it, son? Sit down, let's talk. That's where it starts. You cannot start these conversations and these relationships when the system and the world has already got them. It's too late. Conversation, presence, being reliably there. Talk often without judgment. Sometimes in our culture we want to judge. I'm a big, big advocate of bigging up your child rather than making them feel small. So I never ever said to my boys, you're stupid, you're foolish, you're this, you're that. I never used that kind of language. I reverse it and say, you're a king. You have promise. Speaking life to them. Knowing who their friends are. One of the most beautiful things when my son turns 16, I've still got this photo. It's just a wonderful thing. I said to my wife, I thought he said he didn't want any friends. And I look in the garden. There must have been about 20 people there. All sorts of friends, but I knew every single one of them. Even the white friends. And they would come in, excuse me, Mrs. Akinsanya, is it okay if I have some more jollof rice? But it's just knowing who their friends are. Even now, when he comes home as a young man, he's going to be 21 in July. And I got home the other day, one of his good friends he's known him since he was 8. They're at the same university. I walked in, Max is there. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Know who your young people are associating with. Know their friends. Let them come to your house. Let them see how you live. Let them understand you. Things like, we live in this crazy world where no one wants to sit down and eat together anymore. Having meals together. They all sound like very trivial things, but they're so important to building relationship with your children. Eating together. School run or bedtime. Who are you with today? These conversations. And then obviously the village. We always talk, it takes a village to raise a child. But what does that actually mean? Because if the village was working, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we've got now. So school, faith, community, mentors. I've been mentoring for, longer than 30 years. The first young man I mentored was 13. He's now 42. And I remember going to his son's christening earlier in the year with my wife, and it was just such a humbling moment. I remember meeting this kid at 13 years of age. Be the adult who consistently shows up, and it can change a child's life. And John will most probably knows that I've got 2 biological children, but I've got children everywhere. Because there are young people that I have been in their lives since they were 9 years old, 8 years old, and now they're young men and women. Yeah, a lot of that's repetitive. Just spending time. And then the warning signs. That's all part of the county lines, but again, someone buying your child things that you haven't seen before, a phone you didn't buy, a second secret handset, that happens a lot. Items appearing or going missing from the home. And then with behaviour, new older friends going out missing for hours, sudden secrecy and mood swings. Yeah, all of that, I've been through it. Falling grades, sleeping at odd hours, out at strange times. You know, challenge your children. I mean, there's no way my children would be out after 7 or 8 o'clock in secondary school. For what? And even now at university, can you believe, even now, one of them still lives at home, the other one is up in Nottingham. And he'll tell me, I'm going to a club or I'm going here. And I still tell him, drop me a text or flash me when you're at the club, flash me when you're getting home. And sometimes it's 3 in the morning, but my phone is always on. I never turn my phone off. And with one eye open, I'll see the phone light up, and I'll see my son's name, Dad, I'm back at campus. Because he knows it's important to me. Even though he's hundreds of miles away, he knows how important it is to me to make me feel at peace, to let him know he's okay, let me know he's okay. I can't really read that, but anyway, I think that's more to do with, can you see that? I can't even see it. Must be my age. Well, you've read it, so you know what it says. Yeah, what parents should know about the university years. And again, this is, you've got the 2 crossings, primary to secondary, then from 6th form to university. That comes with another issue, going to university. It's the first time they're away from home. They go crazy. They want to be in everything. They want to go everywhere. They want to spend your money. And sometimes people are watching them, and they're a target from day one. We've talked about how people want to use your accounts, what we call the money mules. Spiking drinks is a big one for the girls. I can't stand that. I think it's wicked. But I've been involved in cases where people seek to spike young women's drinks so they can have their way with them. County line still operates. Of course, you've talked about sextortion already. And then the mental health away from. I always check in with my younger son because I realize that it's a very difficult time to be a young person. There are so many things going on, things vying for their attention, the uncertainty of the future, lack of job prospects, all of these things. So I always check in with him. Son, how you doing? How's your mental health? When I was growing up, we didn't have any of that mental health. And maybe we should have done, because there's a lot of things we went through. If I think about some of the trauma I had, oh my goodness me. But anyway, by the grace of God, I'm here. But this is where we are, and it's good to check in with the youngsters and just make sure, keep finding out, how are you doing? How's everything? And you recognize that there's a certain age where you don't have that same parental control that you had when they were younger, but you can still supervise and give words of wisdom, stay connected. Interestingly, everyone most probably knows that passage where it says, train up the child in the way they will grow, and when they grow, they won't depart. I might have got that wrong, but that's roughly. And it's true that some of the things that I've said to my children as young boys that I think go over their head, they are listening. And so it's important that you keep speaking these things to them, have the conversations. And with the boys, definitely, I've talked to them about consent. and about sex. I even tell them, do not be left in a room on your own with a girl. If you go to a party, please do not do that. No means no. Because I've done so many rape cases where young men have found themselves involved in a situation where they've been alone with a girl. Perhaps he has rebuffed their advances because the girl likes him, and the next minute, oh, he tried to do X, Y, and Z. And once the allegation is made, the system takes it seriously. It can happen. I've seen it happen. And so it's really important that you have the conversation. And I've talked about regular calls, confident, informed young adult who knows where the traps are is your goal, not an anxious one who fears the world. And I think I've done my best to equip my boys with these are where this is the minefield, this is where the potholes are, and they're quite astute. Fortunately, their dad's a criminal lawyer, so they've had the benefit. I've even taken them to court with me so they can see firsthand what happens. And I remember they were shell-shocked when they left court saying, wow, this is real, this is real. So, I'm going to wrap this up. Young people want to be seen. If you are someone who wants to invest in your child, then, as it says, purpose is, I think that's just protection. But that's what it's all about for me. If they fall into the wrong hands and they're being robbed of their future, how are they ever going to discover that gift, the gift that they've been given that makes room for them? And I'll leave it there because my time's run out. But thank you.
Inviting your children's friends round so that you know the parents, you know your children's friends. This is so important. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to thank you for your patience. Obviously, it's still very warm, but you'll be glad to know we're going to have a break. You've done really, really well. We've got some light refreshments, some plantain crisp, some oats, flapjacks, some juices, just to freshen up a little bit. It's 10 minutes though, and then we'll be back to hear the last two speakers, and then we'll move on to the book launch. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
It's not
Kenny. So if you're working, you don't check something when you're working. It's not professional. I will tell you what to do. It's my son. Like my student and it's my son as well. Yeah. Yes. I got it. I'll join, then you make me a co-host so I can share my screen. Yeah. I'll move. What's the time frame for the other one? Okay, there are two more speakers now. There's supposed to be four. Yeah. 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 And even when the speakers don't go in depth, people don't ask questions. Where's the microphone? You need to wear the one in green.
Okay, what am I supposed to do? Oh, it's magnetic. Okay. Under my shirt. Oh, okay.
Is it not working?
Is it working now? Yeah, please. Save my voice, I think. No, no power. Okay, you know, like he said, I'm also kind of a technology, what did he say, dinosaur? I'm trying, but I'm still, I'm in dinosaur 4 now.
If you are in dinosaur 1, may God deliver you. But I'm in dinosaur 4. So I'm still closer to the extinction. You know, they were still alive when my great grandfather was still alive. I think dinosaurs were there. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kemi Emmanuel. As she has said, I'm a global award-winning author of over 30 books. Actually, 35 now. Everybody keeps saying 34. Please make a note, it's 35. And by the end of next month, it will probably be like 38 or something. I'm just that crazy book lady. I love my books. But there's also something I'm very passionate about, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Now, I worked with Chioma on publishing her book. I was the publisher. And that book is so important to me. It's so important to me. I will. Be patient. You don't have ADHD, do you? Because it brought back so many memories. Memories of childhood, memories of parenting, and knowing that there was so much that could have been done differently. That would have made a huge difference. You know, I think, was it Mr. Akinsanya? Mr. Stephen was talking. What do they call people with OBE now? Do they have a name? Remember, MBE? Sir, that's it. Sir, we have to give honor to whom honor is due. Sir Akinsanya, he spoke just now, and I tell you, I burst into tears. I burst into tears because of what I know. Because everything he said here was true. I have had the experience with my own close people, and not just what he said, what, was it Amaka that spoke before? Uloma said, and what, sorry, me and names at the moment, Joe Dunn, what he said as well. I'm telling you, I can give you examples of each one of them. You know, so it is so important that as parents, we take this seriously. Because most of us, when we're coming into parenting, we come just because I just got pregnant. Congratulations! Everybody says, you know, you're pregnant. You don't know the kind of job you've just taken on. Then they bring this baby to you. And this baby is crying non-stop. You can't stop it. And that is not the last of it. You're a woman. Your hormones are raging. But the baby is crying. It could even be worse. You start to hate this baby. It could even be worse. You could kill the baby. I have worked in mental health forensics. I have worked with parents who killed their child. It's called infantilism. I have worked with a parent who took her child because of mental health, went to the Thames and chopped the child in there. The child is still alive. But the mom is in the mental health institute, obviously. And imagine the trauma that child is going through. So that's why this book was so important to me. Because it was trauma-informed parenting. And everything I do right now is about being trauma-informed. Because I work with trauma a lot. I've had my own traumas. I do a lot of work in trauma. So it is so important as parents that we heal from our own trauma so that we can be the parent that these children need. Chioma always says something. She says, to raise a generation of children who do not have to recover from their childhood. We are recovering from our childhood. I'm just telling you that now. Many of us. We're doing the recovery. But unfortunately, we're taking the recovery out on our children. And because we're taking the recovery out on our children are now trauma-filled. They are full of trauma. It's like what Jodan said. I remember when I was doing my mental health nursing, I had to do something called a transition. Transition. So it's perfect. And I had to go into the schools to speak to the special educational needs. I used to be an academic myself. I used to be a teacher. I used to be the principal of a college. So I know about young people. And I've written books for them because I really want their lives to change. So I remember at that time, when I went into the school, my daughter she had a best friend. It's funny. We live next door to that best friend now. And they don't even talk. That's what prayer can do. Anyway, that's what I'm saying to you. If you're a parent, like he said, you need to know your children's friends. My child was 10 years old. She had a friend who was also 10 years old. She was about just a few months older than her. And what was happening was that this girl, I don't know what kind of family she came from, and unfortunately, my daughter is very mature. She's in uni now, first year of uni. She's finished first year now, praise God. But she was very mature. So what used to happen was that this friend of hers used to use her as her therapist, if you like. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for them, is that the same thing happened with my other daughter who's here. She's grown up now. Most of the time when I pass on when they use phones, it's usually my phone I pass on. So the beauty of iPhone at the time was that if you're using iCloud, you can so when you pass it on, the iCloud is still on my new phone. So every text message I get, most of the time I ignore. But I will look at it and think, there was a day she was doing text messages with her friend, and they were killing me. And I was laughing to myself. I was bad mom, because I wasn't letting them do what they should do. So this time around, the girl was now complaining about her family, her mental health, and all sorts of things. And she said something. She said, "Oh, I'm just going to kill myself." Ha! That was it for me. And I was in mental health. I'm going to kill myself. That, in fact, the minute I saw the text message, and my daughter was the one now consoling her, "Oh, no, you don't need to do that." I thought, no, that's too much for another 10-year-old to take. Now, why was this happening? Because the parents weren't aware. So she was using her friend as the therapist, which is what your parent is supposed to be. You are supposed to sound off your parent. So obviously, when I saw this, I thought, no, this has to end now. So I went to the school. Luckily, I was involved in transition with the school. So I explained to them that as a mental health practitioner, this is a very serious thing. This is dangerous. So I told them they have to inform the parents. They have to let the parents know that this is, and safeguarding, as a professional, safeguarding was my responsibility. So I had to make sure that they let them know. And from that minute, to be honest with you, I'm a Christian, I'm a minister, I started to pray that relationship away. So by the time they got to secondary school, they had separated, which I'm sorry to say, but I was happy about because, do not be unequally yoked. I'm a Christian, so sorry if I use Christian scriptures, but we shouldn't be unequally yoked. That's the fact of the matter. Because if we're, not that we can't be friends with people, please, I'm not saying don't do that, But if you're going to be a friend to somebody who doesn't have your belief, especially as a Christian, you should also influence them as a Christian, with Christian beliefs, and Christian morals. Okay, that was my child. She's 18 now. She's a strong Christian. She also has her friends and her friendship group. I run a podcast as well called Purpose Pathway. And the first episode was with her and her friends because we went away together on her 18th birthday. So we went away. So these are the kind of things that are so important to your children. That's time you spend with them. Those things that you do with them to make sure, especially because I knew she was transitioning. She was going from secondary school, from A levels, she was now preparing for university. So I thought it was a good time, you know. It was my first episode on the Purpose Pathway podcast. And there were about 8 of them. And it was amazing to see that we were all in the room in a house together. No fights, no nothing. They were also peaceful. Because they were all Christians. And when we started to talk, when I started to ask them about their aspirations and what the things they wanted to do, I thought, your network is your net worth. My daughter is very rich. Because all of them had one thing or the other they wanted to do. One was going to be a doctor, there was going to be an economist, there was going to be this, there was going to be, you know, all big positions, professionals, they all wanted to be. So I'm thinking, okay, this is your future. So you've made the right choices in terms of the people that you surround yourself with. And that's so important. Your network of people. Here I am surrounded, you know, Choma is part of my network. And we have other people here who came here who are part of our network, who came here to support Choma. Because that's what you do. But as a parent, we also need to be part of our children's network. I was using this as microphone. We also need to be part of our children's network. Now, today I want to talk to you about parenting beyond the label. Yeah? I wanted to establish what it meant to be a true parent. Now, was it Amaka that spoke about digital? Uloma. Sorry, Uloma. Why do I keep calling her Amaka? Uloma spoke about the online and digital safety. I have a friend whose son, how did she find her son? She found her son video. It was from the Roblox. So if you people feel that Roblox is supposed to be keeping your children safe or keeping your children occupied and you are not looking into it, well, I'm sorry for you. The person contacted the child from Roblox and said, I'm going to kill your mom if you don't do what I ask you to do. 11-year-old boy, what does he know? Got him to go and film himself naked in the bathroom. To God be the glory, mom walked in on it. Mom was like, what are you doing? The police were involved, nothing happened. This is online. So I'm telling you, and mom has mental health background. So I'm telling you that it can happen to any one of us if we don't keep our eye out on what our children are doing online. Now, it has even got worse with this person. I can't tell you that the story ended well. So that is, okay, that is in what we call, what's it called? In the digital perspective. Then I will come to what Sir Akinsoya was talking about. That, I just cried. I couldn't help it. Because that's what happened. I used to work in the 136 suite. The 136 suite is like A&E for mental health. And one day, I just sat there. We had 2 rooms. And the 2 rooms had Nigerian children in them. And I'm thinking, why? There was one that came in. I'm telling you, when I came back the next day, they left him naked in a van the whole day. I had discharged him thinking he was going to a safe ward. The ward refused him. Why? They said he was aggressive. But he was drug-induced. But they wanted him to go to psychiatric intensive care. Please, watch what your children are doing. Because once, like he said, once they get into the system, they can, if they come out, it's only God. That means you must be on your knees 24/7. Because once it's like a net. Once they fall into that net, that's it. Because once they start on medication, that's it, you're done. So, that's the reason why I wanted to do this particularly. Parenting beyond the label. Because a lot of our young people, both male and female, have a label attached to their name now. ADHD, autism, one thing or the other, and it's seen as a label. But because we, almost all of us here are African, I believe that, because we as Africans don't believe that this thing should happen to us, it's not for us. Hey, God forbid, it's not my problem. Hey, it's not my passion. Not my passion. Not my passion. Yes, it's not your passion, but when it comes to you, what are you going to do? You're going to make it not my passion, not my passion, not my passion, and then, you know, your child, before you know it, God forbid, just like he's saying, guilty. I also had to do, you know, I was going to go and be the prison lead for one of the prisons, you know, from where I was working. So I had to go to the prisons. I actually wanted to work in the prison, but I just couldn't imagine being locked up for that long, you know, the whole day. I couldn't do it. So I was going to be the prison lead, and I went in to also go and see what was, you know, how the prison was and all that. And I had to do my research. So I did research, and I found that more than 80% of the young men in the prison, number one, were of African heritage. Number two, had neurodivergence, were neurodivergent. Go check your figures. Majority of them are neurodivergent. There's lots of stats that majority of the young boys who end up in prison are neurodivergent. And that's why, you know, we need to understand what it is. We can't say, oh, it's not our passion, it's not for us, we don't do this, you know. We need to understand it. Because when the doctor is telling you, oh, we did an autism assessment, and this person is autistic, then you need to understand, okay, how do we manage this? Rather than, oh, you know, why is she not social? Why doesn't she engage with people? Why, you know, I wrote a book, and it's because of what I was seeing in mental health, called The Essential Social Skills for Teen and Young Adults. Because I was seeing a lot of teenagers coming in with social anxiety. My youngest daughter, she's not like the older ones who are like me. She is very reserved. So I thought, okay, I need to start teaching her social skills so that she can engage more in society. Because if you have the right social skills, it can take you places. You know, so that's really important. So today I want to talk to you about understanding neurodivergence. This is a compassionate guide for parents and caregivers because your child doesn't need to be fixed. They need to be understood. Yeah? You don't need to fix your child. You just need to understand them. And I am here and I will proudly tell you, I'm neurodivergent. If anybody hasn't figured that one out yet, then, you know, the day I found out, I'll be honest with you, I was doing my course on assessing neurodiversity. I was doing my ADHD assessment course. And then they said, oh, they started mentioning all the symptoms. I'm like, that can't be right. You know? God, so all these problems I've been facing, God, all these things I've been encountering. You know, it's so hard to accept as well. And then I went to my daughters and I said to them, she's there, I said to her, I just did a course. And it looks like they were talking about me. They were talking about me. It's like I have ADHD. You know what she said to me? Mom, we could have told you that. I'm like, really? No one told me. I've been working with people with ADHD for years. Remember, I'm supposed to be a professional. Did I know what it meant? No. I just knew it was, now I've forgotten what the full meaning is. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Yeah, that's what we know. When I was a support worker, I remember I worked with so many of them. I worked one-on-one with so many of them. They were just hyper, you know? They just jumped everywhere. And you were supposed to be there holding them up, you know? That's what you do. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know why they're jumping all over the place. You haven't got a clue. You know, you just know, he's going to get, you don't have to. You understand? My brother, he's a grown man now with 3 kids. When he was young, Jesus. Now I know that he probably does have it. He probably still doesn't know. But he was banned by my aunt from coming to her house. Because every time he came there, he had to go and unpack everything. Her TV, he had to find out what was behind it. Her radio, he had to open it up. So in the end, my aunt said no. You can imagine, my aunt was a principal of a school at that time. You can imagine, she's supposed to be an academic. But does she know what it meant? No, we didn't know what it meant. You know? So it was a case of ban him, don't bring him here anymore. Because every time he comes here, and he never sat still, he couldn't. He just was out there all the time. He will just do some things. He still does it. Very impulsive. I am as well. So, you know, to be fair, I think all the symptoms is ridiculous. Anyway. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to check. You tell me. Thank you. We're going to find out. Yes. That's why I'm here, to explain what actual neurodivergence is. Neurodivergence is not one thing. It's not because somebody's busy. You understand? There's a lot attached to it. It's not because somebody likes to jump all over the place, you know. That's not it. There's more to it. You understand? There's more to it. It's just the way the brain is wired. Now, I can't say that. Supporting children's mental health through understanding rather than fear. So this says supporting children's mental health through understanding rather than fear. We try to support them with fear because we are afraid of what the world is going to say. We are afraid of how they're going to react because your child is different. The child who has autism is a spectrum. And you see, because he's what's it called? He's nonverbal. You don't want to take him to church because when you take him to church, maybe he will make some funny noises and everybody will be looking at you. So, what is normal? Anyway, you know who I am. Neurodivergence describes brains that are wired differently. So, it is not their fault. That's the first thing you need to know. The brain is just different. Yeah? Not broken, not ill, just different. It includes conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia. Yeah? And we've seen a lot of people with this condition go on to do so many great things. Now, ADHD, autism, dyslexia. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Yeah? There is ADD, which is attention deficit disorder. So they're not as hyper. So there's different forms of ADHD. Some people are not hyper. You know, it is more to do with concentration. It is more to do with being able to stick with a task and complete. It is more to do with not having interest in certain things and not having interest in certain things. That's ADHD. I'll explain it further. Autism is more about social skills. So it's more to do with not understanding how the world works. An autistic person does not understand how the world works. That's the fact of the matter. I remember one I was dealing with. Her mental health was so deteriorating. She was working, you know, she was about 19 or so, but she was working. And her mental health was just, you know, I just watched it deteriorate. Thank you. Because many of them didn't understand at work. They didn't understand. The work used to be, what's it called? Overwhelming. That's the word, thank you. Work used to be very overwhelming for her. And they didn't understand it. But they expected her to engage with people. When they go to the pub, they expect her to go with them, and she's not into that kind of thing. They expect her to socialize, but she can't. She's finding it so hard, and she's finding it so hard to fit in. So autism is actually quite common. you know, in a lot of people. And I see a lot of people with autism. I recognize them. Most people, their teachers don't. As soon as I see them, I say, yeah, I know. You're autistic, you need to go and do your assessment. And then I will refer them for assessment. Then dyspraxia is more almost physical, you know, the movement and things like that. You will know a child who has dyspraxia. Their movement is affected in the way in which they stand or they move, you know, and it's just the way they are. Dyscalculia is more like dyslexia. I'm sure we've heard a lot about dyslexia. I remember there was a time I used to teach health and social care, and I was teaching about dyslexia. And this mother said, my God, that's what my son has. Her son was 25. She didn't know. She said, he goes to school, he can't put the letters together, he can't read. He's 25, he can't read. She didn't know until he was 25. All his life, he could not achieve anything because mom did not know he had dyslexia. It was when we were doing the training that she now realized, oh my God, yes, that's what he has. Tourette syndrome. Who knows Tourette here? Okay, tell us, what's Tourette? Yeah. Okay, wait, he was shouting. Yes, he just, yeah. Involuntary, yes. So you have tics, you know, where sometimes it's like you just say, you're bad, you're stupid, you know, or you have just tics. Some don't verbalize, so some just have the, you know, every minute, before you know it, that, you know, and that's what Tourette syndrome is. Again, you know, parents are trying to cure them. Yeah, go on. Oh my God.
She had a friend who had the verbal
Tourette's. Yeah, Tourette's.
But she doesn't know if it was imitation first or something, but the problem was she didn't always have it. So, but this one was, she said, the mother said, somersaulting.
Wow.
So that's really severe.
It is amazing. The kind of ways, you know, it's like you know, I don't know if you know this condition where this person falls asleep every 5 minutes. I've forgotten the name. I've been trying to remember the name. Narcolepsy. Yeah, we have a doctor in the house. So he will remind me of anything I forget. Yeah, narcolepsy. I was in the doctor's surgery, and this guy just came in, and the next day he was on the floor. I'm like, huh? Although I knew it, but I didn't know that that's what he had. You understand? And he had slept 2 minutes. He was up, back again, sitting down, and 10 minutes later, he was, and I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody has to live with this all his life. Nothing anyone can do about it. So it's really important that we understand these conditions. And there's so many more, but you have to do your own research. So they are not mental illnesses. They are different, not defective. Yeah? They're not defective products. God did not give you a defective product. God gave you something. He says children are the inheritance of the Lord. He gave you a child as inheritance, not defective product. You can't say, oh, because they gave me a house in where is that? Is it Makoko? Or is Makoko in Lagos, isn't it? It's called Makoko, isn't it? They gave me is it Magodo or Makoko? No, Magodo is, no, I know Magodo. Makoko, because they gave me a house in Makoko, then this person doesn't like me, even though it's a 5-bedroom house. You understand? For those who are Nigerians anyway, you know, it's like a slum, you know, and somebody gives you a house in a, you know, in a slummy area, and you think, and it's a beautiful mansion, but because it's in there, then you think, how dare you give me that kind of house, you know? But it's a house. Okay, neurodivergence is not depression. Neurodivergence is not schizophrenia. Neurodivergence is not bipolar disorder. Yeah? These are mental illnesses. Now, I'm not saying it. A lot of people who have depression are neurodivergent because people don't understand how to look after them. A lot of people who have schizophrenia are neurodivergent because, again, they don't get the support. A lot of people who have bipolar become neurodivergent, but it's not the same. They're two separate things. Yeah? Now, ADHD, the common traits. So this is where I'm going to come in. Common traits, constant movement or endless energy. Yeah? It's common, but it doesn't mean everyone has it. Yeah? And I find that, as you grow older, it's not as bad. Usually, I know when people come into me, and when you see them, the legs shaking constantly, the hands shaking, you start thinking, okay, maybe we're coming there. Difficulty focusing on uninteresting tasks. That's the key. When you see your child wanting to do maths that they don't want to do, it's because it's difficult. Now, I like to use this because when I was a child, my mom beat the living daylight out of me. But they didn't realize that actually it was my sight. I had issues with my sight. So when she was teaching me, I'll be seeing double, the thing will be blurry and I'll be seeing the thing double. But I told you that, boom! Hi. What am I going to do? Well, she knows I did well anyway. It's okay. And difficulty focusing on interesting tasks. I am somebody, I hyper-focus a lot. That's why I've written 35 books in less than 2 years. Because that's what my brain is interested in. Academics has always been, I have 5 degrees because my brain is interested in that. But when you ask me to fill out application forms or do those stupid training that they ask me to keep doing in mental health, it's like punishment. My kids know, have you done the training more? Please, it's punishment. You understand? Those kind of things I find really hard. But when it comes to things like this, academic and all that, my brain loves that. I say it's a dopamine fix. I get my dopamine fix from this. So, uninteresting tasks is where the problem is. So when you notice that your child is not focusing because they don't want to do that thing, find out. Maybe it's something that they're not interested in. And then we have to find a way to make it interesting. Hyper-focus on passions. I've talked about that. Impulsivity. I'm sorry, but that is something I'm still struggling with. And when your child is impulsive, maybe just does things without thinking, does these things, it can, for you as a parent, it can be because why can't you sit down and do only one thing? Why can't you, you keep trying to get this person to do only one thing, but they can't. It's very hard for them, I just do so many different things. That's why in my bio you can see, I have been principal, I have been lecturer, I have been entrepreneur, I've been mental health nurse, I am an author, I'm a publisher, I've been what do they call it? Property investor, you name it, I've done it. I was telling her the other day that I did a NIBOSH because somebody came to me and she was having problems with health and safety. I did the NIBOSH, I should do. You name it, I've done it. If you have a name for it, I think the only thing I haven't done is medicine. I'm getting there, innit? So I did mental health. So, prescriber. I had to do mental health, then I had to go and be a prescriber. How will you not do that one? Then I had to do ADHD, then I did autism. Then, you name it, I've done it. So, sorry, I didn't take my antihistamine today, so bear with me. Emotional intensity. I didn't realize that was what it was. I remember the first time my mom took us to go and watch Jesus of Nazareth. Hey, I cried that day. I was about maybe 8 years old. I cried like my life depended on it. Huh? Oh. Yes. When he was speaking, I cried. So now I don't even watch news anymore. Because there was a day I watched the news and I was supposed to go and teach. And I sat down there on the floor crying. Crying my eyes out. Why is this world so evil? So now I don't watch news. Because I will not do anything in my life. So I avoid anything that will give me emotions. But it's the beauty of it, and that's what I'm going to look at. The beauty of it is because on the other side, I'm very empathetic and I'm very compassionate to people who I work with. You know, I'll answer your questions in a minute. You know, to people who I work with, I am very, people who know me know. You know, I'm full of love, I'm full of compassion, I'm full of emotions. You know, I can share your emotions. When I remember doing my 50th birthday, and one of my friends, she said something. She says, Kemi, if you tell her you have any kind of pain, she says, Kemi will say, you have that pain. I was laughing my head off. She said, Kemi will take on that pain as if it belongs to her. But that is part of, that's how I know, So I don't see it as a limitation. I do have my limitations, I can't lie. Time blindness is my major limitation. My father said to me when I was young, he said, I hope this thing does not cause you problem when you grow up. So I thought he cursed me. That was what I used to say. I said, it's my father that cursed me. That's what he said to me. I'm still struggling with it, but I'm trying. It's not. So when your child is like that, please don't. You cannot keep to time. Every day you are late to school. Every day. You understand? Yeah, we can do that, but it's not helping. It's not going to change the situation. We just have to teach them skills to manage it. Overwhelm. Oh, Jesus. The amount of times I just put this, because I'm doing so many things, I'm doing like 10 different things, I get so overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, God, where do I go from here? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And as you can see, even in my life, I'm doing so many things. Everybody that knows me, they'll be thinking, how does she? I have my Bloom Circle, of women. I have my Purpose Pathway podcast. I'm writing books. I'm helping people write books. I'm a mental health nurse. So sometimes I do get overwhelmed. I can't help it. I try to reduce, and then I find myself adding more. The more I try to reduce, then I find something else, to replace it. So overwhelm, multitasking, a lot of doing so many different things at once, and not being able to finish tasks. Please, if your child is not finishing their task, please keep an eye on them. There might be a reason why. It might be, they've found another interest. So, okay, can we get a volume? Can we get volume here? Please. This is a video I just did. I just learned how to do videos, so. Something. I found another toy. And I spent my time doing this in the middle of the night. Because sleep is another problem. So if your child is not sleeping, please keep an eye on it. I find it hard to go to sleep. But yeah, I'm doing something while I'm awake. So I found this. I'll tell you what it is later. What happened? Yes. So now you're going to see a lot of videos from me. I'll go and do those Nigerian videos. Those ones they do. Nollywood put it. I'm thinking, oh, I like this. So I did it, funny enough, for ADHD. That's what I did it for. So I thought, okay, this will be a good tool to use, to express what it means. Can we go back? Okay. Can you press play? Yeah. Press play. Okay. Okay, yes, you can increase it. Okay, let's start again. Let's start from the beginning.
Finding a gentle guide helps transform wild spirits into something
Okay, that's it. Stop. It was a very short video. Okay, thank you. Because that just is typical, because relaxing is very difficult for a child with ADHD. It's very difficult to relax. I remember my parents saying to me, you never relax. I still struggle with relaxation. I'm a mental health practitioner. I know all the breathing exercises and all sorts of things. But relaxation is very, it's always been, yes, it's always been difficult for me to relax. So I'm just going to run through it because I've run out of time. There's different communication styles. With autism, communication is usually the key. There's a lot of sensory sensitivities because of overstimulation. So when you see your child shouting, no, I can't stand here, it's too much, it's too loud, it's too, take them seriously. Sometimes they have deep interests. I don't know if you know this young man who used to draw. He used to draw some amazing paintings all around London. He was featured on the BBC. No, not Banksy, not Banksy. Banksy is probably autistic. That's why you don't see him. He doesn't socialize. Autism is kind of like the opposite almost of ADHD. With ADHD, you're full of life, Autistic people are a bit more withdrawn. So, you can't talk. I remember I had a niece then. The mom used to beat her for not talking. Why can't you talk? Boom. Why can't you talk? Boom. She's mixed race. She's here, That used to be our thing growing up. Why aren't you talking? Everybody else is talking. Why aren't you talking? Boom. This is what we do to our children. That is trauma. So imagine she grows up and then this is what she has to unlearn. Okay, sorry. So there's a need for routine and structure with autism. It's very important. Honest communication is very important. Yeah? I'm going to move on quickly. The neurodivergent people, but inside the mess, there's often a system. Many neurodivergent people appear disorganized. I call it disorganized chaos. Organized chaos. I have my organized chaos, but I know where everything is. So I'm going to move on. When nurtured, ADHD can be a superpower. Yeah? It's a superpower for me. I've been able to achieve so much because of it. People wonder how, but I now realize that it's a gift. Writing so many books in such a short period of time is a gift. Being able to have so many different qualifications and learn different things is a gift. I realize it's not for everyone. So some of them can be innovative. A lot of innovation, please. When your child is going from one thing to the other, making one thing to the other, just nurture them so that they can find the one they like and they stick with it. Because they can make so many different things. Entrepreneurship, creativity. A lot of people with neurodivergence are very creative. Who are neurodivergent? Very creative. Risk-taking. They're not risk-averse. I'm not risk-averse. I take a lot of risks. And a lot of people who are neurodivergent take risks. So please, keep an eye on that. You can help with that. Problem solving, high energy, leadership, resilience. A lot of those skills come with it. Okay. These case studies I really want to do quickly. Please, give me time. A young girl diagnosed with autism. These are, I've obviously not put their names on, but these are scenarios that I've encountered. Her parents loved her deeply, but struggled to let her become independent. They became increasingly fearful, which made her distressed. She became more distressed. And she used to come and see me. In fact, she started seeing me more, and I'm not okay. At that time, I was working at GP surgery. I wasn't a care coordinator. So I couldn't really coordinate her care. She had found a place for herself where she could live independently. Because she obviously, somebody said, helped her with homelessness. So she became homeless. They found her a place. You know what the parents did? The father went and told the homeless people that he has a place for her. And homeless, if you tell them there's a place, that means you're not homeless. She was 27. So she came back to me. She said, how am I going to do this? Because she wanted to be free. At home, they treated her. You know what the parents did? They took her to somewhere outside the country, in an African country. to go and start doing. And so I asked her, I said, what did they do when you got there? The guy brought chicken and was doing, he brought smoke and was putting the smoke all around her face. The guy was just looking at them as if, what are they talking about? Did you change her? No. She's still the same. So it got to the point where they felt that, oh, it must be that she has mental illness. The next thing, they put her on, I think it was risperidone. They put her on an antipsychotic. I was heartbroken because I knew that that wasn't the problem. But there was nothing we could do. I was just in the GP surgery. What could I do? They prescribed her medication, and I was telling her that, but she has to do, the parents are so vested, she has to do what they say because she can't get her independence. Oliver McGowan, you remember them? You remember this? If you're a healthcare professional now, you know that we all have to do this training. And it's because the boy was autistic. But what they did was to treat him like a mentally ill patient. He had learning difficulty. So rather than recognize that, and the mom was telling them, he does not do well with antipsychotics. If somebody is not doing well with antipsychotics, why are you giving it to them? It's like me now. Somebody will say, oh, they drink coffee and they will not sleep for 3 days. My own coffee is my sleeping medication. In the middle of the night like this, I'm drinking coffee to go to sleep because it helps me calm down. So we use stimulants for people who have ADHD. It's funny, because it helps them calm down. Me, I can drink 4 cups of coffee. That's when I get my rest. Some people will drink 1 spoon and they can't sleep. So these are the things we have to understand. So what parents can do, this is listen before correcting. This is in Chioma's book as well. Regulate before disciplining. Regulate means to help them regulate their emotions. And that's another thing. Even I suffered with emotional dysregulation for a very long time, even with my kids. I just didn't know how to manage the emotions. I used to have severe anger, it was very hard. So please, when your children are like that, don't see them as a problem. Yeah. Connect before teaching, understand before judging, support before expecting. So these are people who are neurodivergent and have done very well. Some of them you recognize. Greta Thunberg, you have your, what's his name? One of the richest men in the UK, Richard Branson. Michael Phelps, look at all his medals. You can see where his focus is on. And Simone Biles. Okay, I just wanted to show you this. This is my gift to the world. Jeannie and her genius ADHD brain. I have copies over there. If you want it, you can click on the thing and what's it called? On the barcode, on the QR code, and get your copy. Thank you very much. Funny place, don't worry. Okay.
Today. Thank you. So, first of all, we have Ruth Ruto. Faith Ruto. Faith Ruto, sorry about that. Faith, she is our executive life and career coach. She's actually given us one of the prizes, or 2 prizes, for the raffle. And again, just one last reminder about the raffle. I'm sure everyone's managed to get some tickets to win one of these amazing prizes. I also want to shout out, so Ruth is a life and career, Faith is a, I don't know where Ruth is from. I'm sorry, Faith. Faith Ruto, she's an executive life and career coach and AI strategist. We've got David Agboro. He's the free financial toolkit guy. He's actually offered every single attendant here a free financial toolkit. So speak to Renee, I believe. Okay, yeah, so if we can get everybody's names, then David will be able to share the financial toolkit with you. We also want to thank Dulcie Elliott, Anik Besawa, STEM Academics and Consulting. So STEM, what they do is they offer science and mathematics tutoring. So Abby is in the room. And just over there in the corner. And we also want to thank our 11 plus mock test masters. They provide assistance with those children, young people in years 4, 5, and 6 who are looking to sit grammar exams. So thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you, all of you, for attending. And I'm going to pass the microphone on to Choma, but let me just give you a little bit more information about our amazing founder. So just a quick story before we move on, actually. It's funny that we're sat here because this is the 3rd summit, and I was with Choma when she just, so we were in Reading, went to an event. It was a 2-day event, and it was like a glamping, camping event. It was all about, networking, business growth. And on the 2nd day, we sat in the tent, we were exhausted, we just wanted to leave. And it was a muddy field and everything. And Chuma was like, I'm going to start my event. I'm going to do this summit. And I was like, are you sure? We're in June, and you're going to carry out the event in November or something. And she was like, yeah. And 3 years later, we're still here. So I just want to, appreciate Choma and give her a round of applause for actually putting to fruition this goal and this dream that she had. So a bit more about Choma is that, of course, she's the founder of Purposeful Parenting in a digital age. She's a speaker, social value manager, award winner, and certified families and youth expert. So Choma is amazing, as I keep stressing. She's a certified parenting and youth expert with over 21 years of experience supporting families. She's passionate about equipping, educating, and empowering parents for the digital age. She's committed to helping them navigate modern challenges while creating, nurturing childhoods that children can thrive in. She's a mother of 2 young men. Choma blends her professional expertise with personal experience, offering compassionate and practical strategies. Choma is a dedicated mentor to young people, inspiring and guiding them, the next generation, with her impactful work. So ladies and gentlemen, let's give a massive round of applause to our founder and our newest book writer, author in town, Chioma Fanawoko. Sorry, while I mic up.
And are we going to switch on to Zoom now, or how are we doing? We've got to go over there. Okay, so I think we probably should do that. So we're just going to move, because we need to move to the other room. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do, we're just going to move to the other room. The reason is because we're going live on Zoom in the other room. So if you could please take your stuff with you, and we're just going to move next door for the second part.
So I can come all day.
That's
Because
okay.
Ruth's in Kenya.
Oh, is
So, field trip, yeah.
I'm on mic. Remove. I don't think they really want to know about that. There we go. You've seen them. See another one.
I'm like, how should you register me?
It was because it was me that I did it funny, but yeah. It was me. The way I registered, I put that you registered her. I didn't even know she. Are you okay, madam? Oh, okay. The final. We might actually move, maybe take care. I was going to say, if you unplug it, then we'll take the two of them.